when you give corrective feedback, a lot of my supervisors were so hesitant to give negative or corrective feedback because they thought, oh, that's going to make them want to quit or whatever. But I think especially if you give it in the right way, you actually can end up boosting confidence because you're showing your team member you're invested in them.
Welcome to the AttractionPros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the AttractionPros podcast.
Hey, Josh, how are you?
Hey, Matt, I am doing really well. How are you?
Well, you know that I am fantastic.
Excellent.
So excited to be here again with you. Quick question.
Okay.
If you and your family were to live in another country for, say, 6 years while pursuing, careers, what country would that be?
What an interesting question. There's a whole big world out there. I gotta say, I love living in the U.S. I don't know. There's, hopefully somewhere with a temperate climate and maybe some a good culture and some great food and, lots of great things to do, with the family. I don't know. Italy comes to mind. I think that was just the last, the last international trip I did prior to COVID. And I remember thinking, it's pretty cool here. So maybe I'm going to go with that. What about you? If you and Linda and Otis were to pick up for 6 years, where would you go?
My first thought, although I've never been there before, would be somewhere in like the Norway, Sweden area, just because I have some clients there and it seems like a really great place to at least visit and find out what it would be like, but it sounds like a great place to live as well. So I might say that, although I've been to Italy, I really enjoyed that. We have a guest today that is living in Vietnam, and she says she absolutely loves it. So maybe somewhere in Asia, but it's really hard because I think for me, there would have to be a reason to go there. I don't think I would just pick up and go to another country. So if there was a job opportunity or, something that led the family there, I think then, I'd figure out the best place to be and make the best of it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that we have a guest today who she and her husband, Victor, and now their 2 children are living in Vietnam. And Anna and Victor have been there for the last 6 years, have had both of their children there. And Anna's business is hospitality intelligence, which is what we're going to talk about today.
We're going to talk a lot about hospitality. We're going to talk a lot about intelligence and how we put those together. Anna has a really great history of experience with the intelligence world that has helped her in her current business. And that has helped her focus on the attention to detail and having a method. But now she trains people on how to provide safe procedures. And, what's really fascinating is, kind of taking what she's learned, certainly from her background and being, a US citizen, but now taking that and looking at how things happen in Vietnam, where, as she says, the amusement industry is kind of in its infancy. So there's a lot of room to grow, a lot of opportunity, a lot of potential. And it sounds like she's really having a great time working in that environment.
What I think is really interesting is how she's able to balance cultural norms with many of the standards that she is familiar with and proficient with and is able to train, and being able to integrate that with the culture in Vietnam in a way that really accomplishes both goals, that gets all the standards, especially safety standards across, but also service and operational standards, combining it with the way that people interact with each other and the way that they respect each other, to make sure that you're not putting a square peg in a round hole, right? It's not just taking one culture over here and just putting it over here, but really making sure that everything is seamless and perfectly infused.
Infused, great word. Great
Thank
word. One of the other things that Anna talks a lot about is confidence. And I think that has so many different things that we could talk about, so many layers of the onion that we could peel back. She talks a lot about it with communication and giving feedback and how that really impacts the operation. So I am confident that our listeners and our viewers will love this episode.
Absolutely. And I'm going to go make some citrus infused water right now, just so I could use that word one more time. But in the meantime, let's get to this amazing interview with Anna Danao. Anna
Danao, thank you so much for joining us today on the Attraction Pros podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, Matt?
I'm great. Thank you so much. And can't wait to jump into this conversation. First of all, where are you calling in from?
I'm on lovely Phu Quoc Island in Vietnam. It's a tiny little island on the south end of the country.
Excellent. Excellent. So you've been in the Asia region for a little while. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do there?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we've, Victor, many of you probably know my husband, Victor. We've lived here for the past 6 years. Normally we're based in Ho Chi Minh City, but COVID has wreaked a bit of havoc on the city. So we've escaped to the island, Phu Quoc Island. Yeah, the past 6 years has been a wild ride. We originally moved here. Victor got a job with Teeny World, which is a small attractions, FEC attractions chain in Vietnam. And I got the opportunity to start my own business. First, starting with the very first real ice skating rink in Vietnam. Most Vietnamese people have never seen ice, so it was quite a fun experience. And then we operated 3 more ice skating rinks, a few amusement parks. And now I have the opportunity to do a lot of training, mostly surrounding safety, guest service, and also doing some other support work. For example, we got to support Quantum Creative Services. They did the nighttime show at Vin Wonders here in Phu Quoc. And also helping HB Leisure. Many of you are familiar with HB, helping them get started in Vietnam. So it's been kind of a little bit of everything. The amusement park industry is in its infancy in Vietnam. And so it's been just awesome. Like every day is different. Every day is something new.
When you say that the industry is in its infancy in Vietnam, what does that really mean in comparison to maybe other larger markets or what we see here in the US or other regions in Asia or Europe, that Vietnam maybe is moving towards in the future, but like you said, currently in its infancy? Yeah,
sure. So there are 2 major amusement park chains here, Vin Group and Sun Group. And they are what you would think of as a comparable amusement park to the US or Canada or Europe. Vekoma rides, all of the name brand manufacturers. But other than that, it's a lot of homemade theme parks, I call them. The rides are literally homemade. And then there's a huge FEC community. A lot of Vietnamese people spend a lot of time in shopping malls because it's out of the sun and the hot weather. So that's really popular. But Vietnamese people are certainly getting more interested in these thrill rides. But I will say most of my Vietnamese friends are terrified of roller coasters. So it's still new in that way. But the middle class is growing here. People want to spend money. I mean, COVID aside, COVID has changed things a little bit temporarily. But, the typical Vietnamese family loves spending time together as a family. So amusement parks are perfect for that. But yeah, majority of entertainment here right now is more like FECs. So, but amusement parks are growing, and Sun Group and Vin Group are doing some incredible things to get the country going. So it's exciting times.
Anna, can we go back to the ice skating rinks just for a second? Because you said a lot of folks over there in Vietnam hadn't seen ice, certainly on that scale. So what was it like culturally to kind of indoctrinate them or get them familiar with this whole concept of, I'm going to stand on ice for a while and not fall down and freeze? So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, actually, we had a few, more than a few, buy tickets just so they could touch the ice. It's very hot in Vietnam. So in the northern parts, they see snow occasionally, but most people in Saigon have never seen ice or snow in the elements. So that was really fun. We had a lot of injuries because number one, people didn't know how to ice skate and they didn't know how to fall. So when you fall, I was always taught as a kid, try to aim for your rear end. And then as soon as you can, stand up, because you could get seriously injured by someone skating by you. And, so we really had to rethink how we did staffing. So we needed more people on the ice, teaching people how to ice skate and making sure they weren't slicing each other's fingers. But yeah, we had a few, quite a few injuries that in the beginning. So we had to learn quickly on that, but it was a lot of fun. A lot of just to see someone who's never experienced that before for the first time it's really amazing. It was really a lot of fun.
How much of that were you able to plan for versus maybe some unexpected either incidents or circumstances that would differ from, say, like, if you open an ice rink in Canada, probably many people are showing up and boom, like they're good to go and they're ready. And I would think that from an operating standpoint, even planning out an SOP or hiring, staff and the way that staff are trained, would be vastly different. Even areas where maybe people are not as experienced, but maybe do it more socially or go to an occasional skating birthday party or they've played hockey or whatever it is, compared to a demographic who, like you said, has never even seen ice on such a large scale. How much of that were you able to really anticipate in advance prior to the openings?
Probably, it's hard to answer that, but we weren't able to anticipate a lot of it. I mean, even starting from, we did group interviews, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners do as well. So we did group interviews, but even in that process, the applicants looked at us like we were crazy. Like, you want me to sit on a balloon? Like, what? and one step further, a lot of Vietnamese people are quite petite, so they couldn't actually, one popular group interview activity is you sit on a balloon and you make it pop, and it's kind of an icebreaker, I guess. But a lot of them couldn't actually break the balloon. So that was just from day one. But and then from training the staff, because hospitality is really evolving in Vietnam, but typically it's not normal to have this kind of bubbly personality that we kind of expect in a guest service experience. When I told the staff and training that, you need to reach out to people walking by, we're in a shopping mall. So you need to reach out to them and say, hey, do you want to try an ice skating rink? They were like, no. Like, we don't talk to guests like that. Like they need to come to us. We shouldn't go to them. So that was, training was definitely a interesting thing. And then the guest experience, we just had to change things on the fly. We had a whole instructor program lined up, but we ended up scrapping that because we learned everyone needed an instructor. So we just, we got our staff trained up. None of our staff had ever ice skated before. So we had to teach them how to ice skate. It was a learning experience every day. Definitely taught me to be adaptable. It was really my first time working as an operator too. So other than, witnessing Victor and his career, but so it was a learning experience every day.
So Anna, how much of the cultural norm, for lack of a better term, do you take into consideration when you're thinking about guest service? And you said people aren't necessarily comfortable being bubbly and going to approach people versus what is their, kind of their cultural comfort zone, if you will. So, applying sort of what we might expect over here in the US to another country.
Yeah, that's a good point, because there's two sides. You want to be respectful of the culture, but you also want to be safe and provide a unique guest experience. For example, one of the cultural issues we had is, and this isn't just in Vietnam, it's in a lot of countries, I think, where you're very respectful of your elders to the point that you would never tell an older guest no. So we had an issue on a train ride where this older gentleman had a baby and he really wanted to take the baby on the train, but the safety requirements wouldn't allow. And our staff immediately came to get me because they didn't want to say no to him. So we really had to identify the safety issues and make that clear to our team members that safety comes before keep making sure everyone feels respected, but also teaching them how to do that in a respectful way, how to remind safety rules in a respectful way. And then some things like confidence is really lacking. But again, I wouldn't say that's unique to Vietnam. I think that's also an age thing. So younger people learning to gain that confidence. That to me, that's something that we can kind of break out of the cultural norm a little bit to provide this unique guest experience. A few weeks into the ice rink opening, we were being recognized for being this, exciting, even though we were just an ice skating rink, we also had liquid nitrogen popcorn and ice cream, which was interesting too. But so I think breaking out of the norm to that in that way was actually a good thing. But also being respectful of things such as, respecting your elders. So yeah, it was, it's always a balance, but I think especially when and I know you guys are big fans of this, but making sure your team members have a say in how we do training and how we interact with guests. So making sure you're really listening to your front line of what makes sense and what doesn't.
How much of your background are you able to bring to the table? Because you're from Tennessee, which looking at your website says the land of hospitality. And I won't argue that, although, I'm in the Midwest, I'm experiencing that Midwest hospitality. Okay. I spent a lot of time in Orlando. There's that too. Is your goal to kind of bring some of that Southern hospitality culture to Vietnam, or are you looking at it purely from a fresh lens and saying, here's the cultural standards or the cultural significances that we're working with, and then blending it in with what you've already known, what you've grown up seeing and doing?
Yeah, that's a good. I haven't thought that deeply about it, but actually I'm a closeted introvert. Something you may not know about me. So, but my mom is the complete opposite. She's a Southern woman, friends with everyone. She knows everyone, and I've always respected her for that. And part of it for me, I think, was that lack of confidence growing up. Luckily, I kind of fell into doing some theater in high school and university, which really helped me build some confidence. I think because you're playing a different character, so you can kind of break out of your shell. And that to me is something I've always been passionate about, is helping other people find that confidence. And it's a cultural thing for sure. Vietnamese people, especially in a hospitality setting, are very shy and they're trying to be respectful, but so helping them have that voice to improve the guest experience. So I've always been really passionate about that, not just in Vietnam, but in everything I do. So, but yeah, I think the hospitality part of Tennessee is probably somewhere in me, making sure I always want people around me to be having a good time. I don't really care if I'm having a good time. I want everyone to have a good time. So yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine that's part of where the name of your company comes from, hospitality intelligence. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like putting those two things together, I think is really, really cool. And I love that name. But can you go a little deeper in as far as where that came from?
Yeah. So, well, the first thing is, I knew I really liked attractions, but in Vietnam and in Asia, there's not a real word for amusement and attractions. The Vietnamese word is actually game. So, so game intelligence, I don't know, it doesn't work too well. So I wanted something that was, encompassed attractions, but also other things, because hospitality is actually seen as a very prestigious career path in Vietnam and other countries in Asia. And I also think a lot of what we do, Josh, and that included, like it transfers to all of the businesses of hospitality. So I think that's part of that. Intelligence. So before we moved to Vietnam, I actually worked for the government, for the U.S. government in intelligence, and I learned a lot from that about attention to detail, about having a method for things. So I wanted to kind of marry those two parts of my life together. I think the intelligence part of me has helped. I participate in right operations audits. So just having that analytical background. And also this, I keep talking about confidence, but I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm not confident and there's nothing I can do about it. But I really believe that, you can have a methodology to teach yourself anything, including confidence. So, so hospitality intelligence was born, but mostly because I needed to operate an ice skating rink. So.
When it comes to confidence, like you were just saying, what are some of those ways to be able for someone to teach themselves confidence, so that even if they are an introvert, to be able to confidently, and maybe even going back to the example that you shared earlier of the gentleman who wanted to bring the child or the baby on the train, of being able to confidently communicate what the standard was, while also at the same time being very respectful that maybe he was, older than the employee who was communicating that, but doing that with confidence and service and respect. Yeah. Well, I think, I teach classes on this, so this could be another podcast episode, but I think it boils down to, in our industry, it boils down to training. And that means classroom training, of course, but practice. The more you do something, the more confidently you can do it. And then also feedback. And that's positive and corrective feedback. When you give positive feedback, I think obviously that boosts your team members' confidence and morale. But when you give corrective feedback, a lot of my supervisors were so hesitant to give negative or corrective feedback because they thought, oh, that's gonna make them want to quit or whatever. But I think especially if you give it in the right way, you actually can end up boosting confidence because you're showing your team member you're invested in them and you want them to do better. One thing I always taught my supervisors, when you're giving corrective feedback, you want to start it with, I want to see you succeed. And that's why I'm going to tell you X, Y, Z. So I think that's a really great way to boost confidence. And then a lot of the tools that you learn in theater, improv, games, lots of tools that we learn in theater can help you boost confidence, learning how to have proper posture, learning how to use your breath control. So these are more physical things that can help with confidence. I think it's not all a mental game, although there is a lot of times where you need to say to yourself, I need to be confident right now. But I think there's a lot of elements from training to your supervisor feedback to
some physical things you can do as well.
So did you find that different, again, kind of going back to the cultural differences, did you find that different to build confidence with the Vietnamese culture versus maybe what you would do with an American culture? Was it a different process, or just maybe, a little?
Yeah, it is. But I would even say it's more than just cultural difference. I would even say it's an individual difference. As you get to know your team, you can start to learn why they're not confident. But I will say in Vietnamese culture, as you go through education, and these things are changing, I should caveat it, but right now there's very much this method of teaching that there's one right answer for everything. Don't think out of the box, don't ask questions. So, in our industry, that's a problem, because we really need people to be proactive, and being proactive takes confidence, right? So, a lot of my training in Southeast Asia, we have to focus a lot on what proactive means and ways we can be proactive. But yeah, again, I would say, for other places, I work with international ride training a lot in the US, and confidence, I think it's more of a generational issue in the US. So just learning, giving supervisors ways to give feedback in a way that can promote confidence. So yeah, it's a cultural thing, but also as much as I'm passionate about cultural awareness, I'm more passionate about the concept that we're all individuals with our own stories and things going on in our lives, and that surpasses all cultural differences.
Love it.
You mentioned the work that you do with international ride training, and I know that's where we last met in person. I think that was the last conference I went to in person as of right now. Right. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you do with IRT?
Yeah. So international ride training, for those who aren't familiar, it's the bread and butter is our ride operator certification program. So this is similar to, you have a driver's license to drive a car. So it's giving ride operators some standards of performance to perform their jobs. And then we also provide audits throughout the year, mystery audits, to make sure everyone's performing to standard. In Asia, so yeah, a lot of what I do for IRT is to try to grow the business in Asia. But because a lot of countries here are still in the early stages of learning about amusement parks, we're not quite to doing certifications. We're focusing more on auditing. So doing, trying to help parks see where they are compared to other parks throughout the world, and what needs to be improved as a starting point. And then we also have a new program called Learning the Ropes. This is an online training course, really came out of the COVID situation we found ourselves in. But this does not require certification, but helps parks to teach about safety and efficiency and just those foundational ride operator standards. So yeah, we're getting started in Asia. We've also done some work in Australia at the parks in Gold Coast, and also for the Sydney Royal East. So yeah, it's exciting to see IRT grow on this side of the world. For sure, we need it. And when I tell people what I do for IRT here, they're so excited, because safety is important here to families. Family is most important here. So parents are happy to hear about safety and quality.
So speaking of some of those foundational skills, you recently sent me an email about something you're working on for the J1 students in terms of, coming over to the US and learning how to operate a theme park when maybe they've never been to a theme park or they don't know what a queue is. And so I'd love it if you could talk a little bit more about that, that service and that support that you're providing.
Yeah, sure. So one of the courses I usually teach at IROC, which is IRT's annual safety school, and I teach a cultural awareness class. And most of my students in that class are coming from parks with J1 programs. For those who are not familiar with the J1 program, it's a student exchange program for American companies can hire students from abroad. This is particularly helpful when during high season or right now when we're having staffing issues in our industry. I also think it's just a cool program because you're allowing your park and your team members to experience a new culture by bringing these students over. And you're also giving these international students a once in a lifetime opportunity. Actually, I've met a few people here in Vietnam who were J1 students, not just from Vietnam, some Romanian people, so Ukrainian, and they just had the most amazing experience. So it's a cool program, but what I found from my students in that course was the students were arriving and, they just couldn't hit the ground running because a lot of them had never even been to an amusement park. They certainly had never been to the US. And unfortunately, a lot of the agents kind of advertise these jobs as, oh, welcome to New York City, come work in New York City. But really the park might be in, somewhere in New Jersey or, not right next to the Statue of Liberty. So there's, culture shock issues, but also just not having that context, never having had to stand in a line before, or maybe they had been to an amusement park, but they didn't know the importance of ASTM standards or the importance of, why a fence needs to be a certain height and bars a certain distance apart from each other. So anyway, we're starting a program where we're going to train the students on some foundational things before they arrive to the US. So some introductions to the US, what to expect, introductions to the theme park industry, introduction to safety and why that's important in the US, and a lot among some other courses as well. Just to help those J1 students get off on the right foot, help them to succeed. Also, hopefully we'll save some time and money on the amusement park end. And I mean, ultimately we want these students to be successful because that helps the park to be successful. And you want the students to come back the next year. So yeah, I think I'm excited about it. It's going to be a pilot program for next year, and we're working closely with some amusement parks to tailor the program to their needs. So yeah, excited to see what we can do together.
Yeah, that's cool that the training begins before they even arrive, which is
exactly.
Which is cool to see. So hopefully they come a little bit more up to speed. I've got to imagine that even and this is aside from the J1 visa program of people who might just be graduating high school and just got a summer job, that they probably also don't know many of those things that the international students that you're referring to. Could you see that extending to just general seasonal employment, as a standard in general before you come here, work here for the summer? This is what you need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, like you said, a lot of the course material, it's not specific to international students. And I think what's cool about this program is we are tailoring it amusement park by amusement park. So where they see their needs. So yeah, I think it could be good for, and surprisingly in Vietnam, one of the universities here has a theme park class, Introduction to Theme Parks, which is pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. Victor, my husband and I were asked to come be guest speakers at this class. The instructor had never been to an amusement park, and none of the students had ever been to an amusement park. So anyway, I think it just made me realize, like, our industry, it's not just a summer job. I mean, most people in the industry, maybe it started like that, but then it became their career. So, it's time to professionalize it. I mean, I know there are universities doing that already in some parts of the US, but I think it's time to give it a little bit more than just a summer hourly job.
Yeah, Anna, in some ways, I'm looking at what's happened with COVID and people looking at a frontline position. And obviously, a lot of places are competing with wages and things like that. But, you mentioned hospitality being a very prestigious career path. And I mean, I'm kind of hoping that this is showing that service and hospitality over here in the US can again be a very prestigious career path. And certainly amusement parks can be a great foot in the door for that experience. Because so often we talk about the lessons that we learn in this business. I can remember back to my first year as a ride operator and learning how to interact with the public. And I still use a lot of those techniques now. So I can imagine those skills could then, like it has for Josh and I and a lot of people, turns into a career.
Yeah. And, the studies are showing that part of the staff shortage issue is not actually because of COVID. It's because this was happening already.
Yeah.
High school students just don't want this kind of job. So I think we've got to find ways to professionalize it. I'm excited for the industry to head that direction.
Yeah.
Going back actually to the J1 program and I guess tying COVID in with that, I've got to imagine that there were substantial impacts to that program last summer, this summer. I know you mentioned you're working on this initiative beginning next summer. I guess I'm somewhat of an outsider sort of looking in here, but what's the current state of that right now?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So last year when the rest of the world was hit so hard with the pandemic, Vietnam acted very swiftly and shut their borders. And they really didn't have COVID for most. I mean, they did a little bit and they had a few little waves. But mostly they did not experience the pandemic in the way the rest of the world did. Now, unfortunately, the Delta variant has arrived and most of the country is under a very strict lockdown. So yeah, things are on hold, but it's not forever. The Vietnamese government knows they need to speed up the vaccination process. So, it's a tough time right now, but it will come back. The country, Vietnam as a country, prides itself on its tourist sites. I mean, not just amusement parks, but Ha Long Bay and Sapa and just, beautiful beaches. So Vietnam really relies on tourism. So this won't be forever. So yeah, I'm still optimistic.
Awesome. And I'd like to change gears just for a minute because you've mentioned Victor a couple of times. Anybody that knows Victor and knows you knows that you have a family over there and, you're raising your family in Vietnam. So what's it been like raising your family overseas?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we obviously we moved here right after we got married and we're in that young adventurous mode, like, yeah, let's move to Vietnam. But then after we moved here, we realized it's actually a pretty amazing place to raise a family. There's as I mentioned before, the value put on family in Vietnam is really inspiring and exciting to be around. I gave birth to both. We have two sons. Both were born in Vietnam. And it was actually a really wonderful experience. The private clinics here talk about hospitality, like they know what they're doing. So, I was in the VIP suite with a hot tub and, the massages every day. So, so the delivery process was fantastic. The State Department here is very supportive to help get their passports. We're able to have a nanny, which we would not be able to have in the US. And she's really become part of our family. She's incredible. Like she just the way she talks to our children, it's like they're her own. So It's a really special relationship we have with her. And then, yeah, it's, you know, as I mentioned before, the middle class is growing here, and FECs are popular. The other thing that's popular are kids cafes. I don't know if they exist in the US, but it is what it sounds like. It's a cafe with things for the kids to do. So the parents can sit, have a coffee, have a glass of wine, and their kids are in the same room as them, playing on indoor play or, you know, whatever it may be. But it's not a Chuck E. Cheese, right? It's a cafe. It's kind of swanky. So
Awesome.
that's a really cool thing. Yeah, it's a really cool concept. And then we just have this amazing community, not just we call them expats, so foreigners living in Vietnam, but there's a huge group of expats here and locals who want to be part of our community. So we're just kind of like a little big family taking care of each other because we're all away from our family. That being said, it is really hard to be away from your family. Before COVID, our families were able to come visit more often, but it is definitely been a challenge to do all of this by video chat with them. So yeah, so there are pros and cons, but yeah, mostly I would say it's a really great experience to raise a family here.
What do you look forward to being able to do with your family as Vietnam emerges, you know, from the pandemic, and hopefully this lockdown ends soon? As, like you said, the amusement industry is in its infancy. What are the things that you are projecting out and maybe already getting excited about that maybe you're not able to do today, but able to do in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have a few projects in the pipeline that I'm not prepared to talk about yet, but because, as you mentioned, attractions are in its infancy here, you know, Vietnamese people are dying to get out, to spend money, be with their family. So thinking of creative ways that aren't big roller coasters. I mean, eventually roller coasters will be valuable here. But right now, I would never advise an amusement park to buy a roller coaster because Vietnamese people, that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for ways to be together as a family. So thinking of creative ways to bring people together, and at the same time, keeping in mind the weather here because we have a rainy season. And so have to keep that in mind, have to keep humidity in mind for equipment and how to take care of equipment. But yeah, we have some operations we have in mind that we're going to bring to Vietnam. That I think it's going to be really exciting.
Awesome. I want to talk a little bit more about that cafe idea because it really, I know you mentioned it's not Chuck E. Cheese, so it's a little bit different than that with the family environment, but you know, it really seems to be in stark contrast to, for example, a Starbucks, right? Where you go over here in the US, where you go in, you have a coffee, but unless your child is on an iPad or something, there's nothing that the company is doing for them to occupy their time. And a lot of coffee shops and wine bars are like that. So I'm curious, just from your standpoint, what would it take, do you think, to create something like that if you were to put on your entrepreneur hat and do that here in the US? What would that look like, do you think?
Yeah, well, so one of the reasons I think they can do that so well in Vietnam is because staffing is quite affordable here. So it is quite staff intensive, at least the way the Vietnamese expectation is that you come in, you throw your kids in the room, the staff takes care of them, and you drink your coffee or glass of wine. And, you know, I think for liability reasons and staffing costs, that would be difficult in the US. But, you know, I think it's definitely possible. And yes, Starbucks would be smart, I think, to add even just a playground. I mean, when you think about McDonald's, I mean, that's a restaurant, but the way they've really made their restaurant an attraction now, it's pretty amazing. I mean, say what you will about McDonald's. I try not to eat there myself because it's not entirely healthy, but I mean, I give it to them because they found a way to make it a destination, not just a fast food restaurant. So yeah, I think it's doable in the US as long as you set the guest expectations that it's not necessarily a free babysitter.
Yeah. The closest I've seen personally is a bar with a play area in it, like in the suburbs, like almost like a family bar, basically. So
Yeah,
not a cafe, but
yeah. And what I like as a parent, what I like about the cafes is it's not just a playground. It's they have like a musical area with instruments. They have a a more physical area with climbing. But they also have areas for like pretend play, and so it's a variety of things. It's not just a playground.
Yeah.
So that way, some days my 2-year-old, he's in a more active mood and he wants to do the climb through the maze. But some days he wants to sit in front of the mirror and pretend to brush his hair and use the pretend blow dryer. So that's what I like about it personally.
Well, it's cool is that it's. Oh, sorry, Matt. I was going to say it is that third space that something like a Starbucks or any other cafe would be able to offer. But bring your family, bring your kids, and it's not the energy level of Chuck E. Cheese, and it's not maybe the stress or exhaustion level of a large theme park or an amusement park, but it's somewhere to be able to kind of get out of the house for maybe an hour or two. So
yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah.
Well, and I was going to say there are FECs, kind of the opposite sort of thing has happened where there's a trampoline park or an FEC and they've started to offer, beer and wine for their families, and they're started to offer, Wi-Fi zones and things like that. But I had not heard of it, kind of the way you put it in the context of it starts with the coffee or the wine and then is added. Yeah. I love the fact that there's kind of education and almost science museum like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a lot of discovery, very kind of Montessori feel. Yeah, I think and this is a cultural difference. So I will say a lot of the kids cafes are based on some Korean brands. So I think this was a Korean concept. I think I don't know that for sure, but it's very much focused on the parent instead of the kid. And in the US, I think we've started focusing on the kid before the parent. Mm-hmm. And there's benefits to both, but something that my husband's actually born in Romania, and something I've respected about the way he was brought up is he was always brought along to the adult activities, like the dinners and the things like that. No iPad involved. And I think ultimately as parents, we want to teach our kids how to be adults. So we want them to play, of course, but so yeah, I think there's some benefits to putting the parents first, and the kids can learn a lot from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have kind of an odd question maybe. When you were announcing the birth of your second child, I remember seeing a picture where there was like the three of you, and there was like a 3 across coaster, train, and you said, "Hey, we can now do the 4 across." We've got the. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that creative process? Where did that idea come from?
Well, so Victor, my husband, is a roller coaster nerd, and so I guess by default I became one. That roller coaster is Nitro from Six Flags Great Adventure, which is my absolute favorite ride in the world. And so because I was taking on the graphic design responsibilities, I got to choose the roller coaster.
Okay.
As you can see, my graphic design skills are not good. One of the children, I think, had gigantic muscles and tank top and very long legs. But no, it was a lot of fun. Victor and I laugh a lot together. And so we had a lot of fun putting our announcements together.
So we might need that picture to attach with the
Oh, and by the way, we aren't allowed, according to Victor, we're not allowed to have a third child because there are no 5 across roller coasters.
Yeah. Take up 2 rows. Yeah, that's
a no-go.
longer wait time. Got to let more people in front of you, find some single riders. So, Anna, if people want to learn more about you, about hospitality intelligence, or get a hold of you, where would you send them?
Well, yeah, I have a website, hospitalityintelusa.com, or find me on Facebook or LinkedIn. I check those regularly. So yeah, would love to talk to anyone.
Excellent. Well, Anna, this has been a fantastic and fascinating conversation about so many different topics. If you have any sort of lasting wisdom or any last thoughts for our listeners, what would they be?
Oh, gosh, I would say enjoy the journey, not the destination. I think we're taught as kids to pick one thing we want to be when we grow up, but I believe in the journey, not the destination. And a big thank you to all of my mentors who've helped me get along this far. So I would recommend, if you don't have a mentor, go get a mentor.
Excellent. Well, Anna, thank you so much again for your time today. We really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. And for everyone out there who is watching and listening, just remember, we are all Attraction Pros.
Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release. And even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit AttractionPros.com.